Hi guys, I'm Priyanka Chopra and you're watching VNN.
This is Pragya Devan and you're watching The Weekly Show, a one-of-its-kind series where we bring stories that matter to you. This is one show where you'll get the weekly roundup of major events that happen in GTA every Friday. So let's get into the highlights of the show today. This week, watch our in-depth analysis of the flooding situation in British Columbia. Catch our exclusive conversation with Brampton councillor Pat Fortini on city's hospital crisis. Know why big brands are leaving Facebook as their medium of advertising. Understand why it is the best time to sell properties in GTA in our real estate segment. Know everything about Vir Das' controversial monologue, Two Indias. And spread the holiday cheer with Toronto's Christmas market. Let's begin the show with the major global stories this week. The World Health Organization has declared the new coronavirus variant identified in South Africa as a variant of concern and named it Omicron. The Delta variant that is dominating infections in Canada and around the world is also a variant of concern. South African scientists detected around 100 cases of the new variant while they were doing genomic sequencing in the country's most populated province, Gauteng. On Wednesday, they informed the government that they were concerned about the variant's large number of mutations, including to the spike protein, that could affect transmissibility. The South African government then reported it to the WHO. Canadian health experts on Friday cautioned against the alarm and said it would take time to assess the potential impact of the variant and that there is no evidence that existing COVID-19 vaccines wouldn't continue to be effective. Moving on, the deaths of at least 27 people in the English Channel is fueling tensions between the UK and France over how to stop migrants from crossing the world's busiest waterway in small boats. Despite a pledge from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and French President Emmanuel Macron that they would do everything possible to stop smugglers from endangering their lives, politicians on both sides of the channel are already blaming their counterparts for failing to prevent this tragedy. British officials expressed frustration that France has rejected their offer to bolster enforcement along the Channel coast by sending British police officers to conduct joint patrols with their French counterparts. But Macron said that his country needed more responsible partners in the UK and the European Union to put an end to people crossing illegally. Carlos Arthur Nuzman, the head of Brazilian Olympic Committee for more than 2 decades, was sentenced to 30 years and 11 months in jail for allegedly buying votes for Rio de Janeiro to host the 2016 Olympics. The ruling by Judge Marcelo Bretas became public on Thursday. Nuzman, who also headed the Rio 2016 organizing committee, was found guilty of corruption, criminal organization, money laundering and tax evasion. The 79-year-old executive won't be jailed until all his appeals are heard. Let's talk about the local stories now that made headlines this week. Starting with Health Canada, which has approved COVID-19 vaccines for children aged 5 to 11 in Ontario. Appointments can now be booked through COVID-19 vaccination portal and contact center, directly through public health units using their own booking system and with participating pharmacies, which people can find by visiting Ontario's website. As of today, Ontario reported 927 new cases of COVID-19, the most on a single day in the province in nearly 10 weeks, while Premier Doug Ford called on the federal government to ban flights from countries where a new variant of concern has been found. In a statement, Ford said that he was briefed this morning by Dr. Kieran Moore, Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, a recently discovered variant that could potentially be resistant to existing vaccines and even more transmissible than the Delta variant, which now accounts for nearly 100% of all new cases in Ontario. In our Explainers segment this week, we get you an analysis report on the worst floods British Columbia has seen in 500 years. Listen in.
British Columbia is the third largest province in Canada, and its current state looks like this. The unrelenting downpour has triggered landslides and massive floods.
The government of BC is declaring a state of emergency.
Canada has deployed Air Force services to conduct rescue operations, and the country is now calling it a once-in-a-500-year flood event in British Columbia.
I can confirm that there are hundreds of Canadian Armed Forces members currently headed to British Columbia to help with everything from supplies to evacuation to whatever is needed. There are thousands more on standby. We will continue to work closely with the province, with Indigenous leaders, with community leaders to make sure that we are doing everything we can to support the people of British Columbia through this incredibly difficult time.
The devastation caused by the torrential rains have forced the closure of the country's busiest port in Vancouver. There are swallowed highways, washed away bridges, and cut off railroads.
Multiple highways remain closed throughout BC. We're working diligently to assess the damage and make sure that we can get those supply roads back in shape as quickly as possible. But the conditions are severe, and it's essential that we work on these corridors in a way that makes safety our highest priority.
Some of the worst hit places in British Columbia is Abbotsford, which is 75 kilometers southeast of Vancouver.
A major impact was in Abbotsford, Chilliwack, major flooding, especially part of the Sumas side. My cousins own a 20-acre farm, and they have a beautiful home. And when they phoned us, they were evacuating, and they said the water came to their window, which is 8-9 feet up. And so they moved into another family's home that they didn't know, and they stayed in their basement. So with a lot of community support, that's for sure.
Print, digital, radio, and video. You choose the media. We are the Voice Media Group.
The severe flooding has resulted in the death of several farm animals.
And some of their barns are flooded, and you can see the animals that are deceased, and it's heartbreaking.
The devastating floods have also caused shortage of food supplies in the area.
What you need, your neighbors need as well. We are confident that we can restore our supply chains in a quick and orderly manner, provided we all act as we have been acting over the past 2 years.
And grocery stores, certain products we couldn't get for the first 2 days, like beef or eggs and milk. There's limitations. They put a limitation on the gas, 30 liters per person. But the first day, a lot of panic buying. So Abbotsford and Chilliwack, so a lot of the grocery stores, emptied out.
And the livelihood of people has also been affected by this natural disaster.
And another thing is a lot of businesses are hurting. We're already hurting with COVID. Businesses are shutting down. Like in my business, we represent over 600 merchants. And in 2 years, we've lost over 200 merchants. And a lot of them, main reason is the business is down. A lot of people are jumping, they say they're retiring. But now with this flood, especially in Abbotsford and Chilliwack, there's going to be a lot more businesses affected. And that's going to affect the whole economy because of employment and whatnot.
As British Columbia moves forward on recovering from severe flooding that forced the evacuation of thousands last week, another series of storms is in the forecast, which could set progress back.
With more rain falling in southern BC, including for the hard-hit Fraser Valley, we have to stay vigilant. While the rain we're seeing today is not as heavy as forecast, we are expecting another rain event this Wednesday through Friday, and a series of further storms are expected in the coming weeks. That's why it's so important at every level that we prepare for these events as best we can.
Unfortunately, we're having another 2 days of atmospheric rain coming. And I just spoke to my nephew a few minutes. He lives in Abbotsford. And he told me as he's driving around, everybody's sandbagging. They're trying to fix the dikes. There's a lot of preparation for tomorrow. And also the soil is all, yeah, so there's going to be issues if this rain hits us again. So we're going to see more issues down the road here.
With several lives lost and many displaced from their homes, the government is doing everything to rescue the residents of British Columbia. But it is still difficult to assess how long this tragedy will last.
Brampton, a city with a population of nearly 650,000, has just one hospital with an emergency room. In comparison, Toronto, with a population nearing 3 million, has 15 emergency rooms. And now Brampton may have to raise $125 million for hospital expansion in the city. This week, I chatted exclusively with Brampton councillor Pat Fortini on the Medicare crisis the city of Brampton is currently facing. Councillor Fortini, first of all, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So I would like to start today's interview with something which is very important for the residents of Brampton, the Medicare and healthcare facilities which were promised to them, especially by the Ontario government in the late 2020, that they would expand the Peel Memorial Centre. Yes. And there is still a lot of confusion about the phase 2 expansion of Peel Memorial Centre. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, going back when the Doug Ford at the province, they came with a throne speech. They did announce a second hospital for Brampton. We had Osler's partners at council. They did say that the province is putting $1.1 billion, and it's going to be a full emergency, 24 hours, 7 days a week, with 250 beds, plus an extra 100 beds in case it expands. Also, they're putting a cancer treatment facility there, which is very important. So the hospital will be about $690 million, and the cancer treatment is about $396 million. So it adds to about $1.1 billion. Every hospital, most hospitals, we have to come up with 10% of the construction costs. We did that to our last hospital that's here in Brampton, the last council. I was not there before. They're a levy, and we have to come up with $125 million. So I know North Bay, they got $1 billion in their hospital. They paid zero for the tax residents. But you can't compare North Bay with 55,000 residents, expect them to pay $125 million. But I think we have to step up because our hospital's very full. We have to do our share.
And you put up this motion in the council recently about the levy. Does it come from a personal experience?
Well, before I ran in 2014, I didn't really know much about, the healthcare stuff at the time because I'd only been to a hospital once years ago. But during the 2018 election, before, we all had these town halls where it shows a lot of people stuck in hallways and the hospitals are full. We get to council, it looks like we all forget, and I'm to blame too. You forget what went on. So going back about 2 months ago when I seen my wife got really sick, it gave me some memories like I remember before the elections, we seen things, but then we forget. And running her to the emergency, and there's a 12-hour wait, and from there pick her up and bring her to Georgetown and bring her to Toronto General and then back to this hospital for surgery. Spent a month running around. And that's not right for a resident to face when it comes to healthcare. I think healthcare is one of the most important things. We have a lot of seniors. I hate to say it, but unfortunately everyone's going to get sick sooner or later, and we all need it. So the last hospital that was built, they had the levy, the last council. I was not there before. In 2012, and it went to 2018. We stopped it because we hit the money we needed, and I paid $43 a year. $43 a year for 7 years. It's not going to hurt anyone because if you actually have to drive to Toronto, to Princess Margaret for cancer or for chemo or anywhere else, it's going to cost you more in gas and parking. So, and at the end, if you actually sit in the emergency, and I told a lot of these counselors, go sit in the emergency, sit there for 5 hours and observe how busy this hospital is. And not only this, even Trillium, they're becoming very busy because when our hospital is busy, they just go down to Mississauga or we go down to Georgetown. We don't have much of a choice.
So going back to Doug Ford's plan, he said that this new facility will include other medical facilities but not the ER. And the stats say that Brampton has nearly 650,000 population, number of people that live in Brampton. And we have only one emergency room. In comparison to Toronto, with a population of like 3 million, they have 15 emergency rooms. And that's really unfair.
Yeah, they got 43 hospitals, 15 emergencies. That's not unfair. And our population, our last census card shows 713,000. We're expected to grow close to 1,950,000 within the next 6-7 years. But if we don't start this now and push for a full emergency and all, this does not get built like a house in 3 months you're building it. It's going to take 5 to 7 years. And if there's a problem now, imagine later 7 years on the road when our population hits 900,000. The Osler Mohammed did the presentation and the CEO Ken at council, and they said there will be a 24-hour emergency, a second emergency. So that's what we're facing. I know Andrew Hudak, the NDPs were here in Brampton. They're pushing for a second, and they say a third. I don't want to jump to a third hospital. It's yet the second one built. You know, people are saying, let's plan for the third. But if we don't have a second, why are you planning third? Yeah. So I really want to push this through. The council supported for the levy. I brought it also to the region, hoping to get help from them, because Vaughan, their levy, they paid 89 million, but some of the money also came from the region. So hoping that the regional councillors in Mississauga will support us, because Caledon, at the end, they use our hospital. Talking to some of them, they're willing to support it, because at the end of the day, it's for everyone. And when our hospital's full, we just go to Mississauga. So if we have a second one, it gives release to their hospital down there.
Yeah.
So,
and this brings me to my next question. You mentioned that you have contacted other regions too for help. I read a statement by the Honorable Mayor of Mississauga, Bonnie Crombie, and she said that Mississauga might not be able to help Brampton, particularly in this time, because they are already planning a new hospital for themselves, which is much bigger than what we have planned for Brampton.
That's Bonnie Crombie talking. She's getting $9 billion. $9 billion. And they're not getting a new hospital. What they're doing is they're replacing the old facility of 1,000 beds. So they don't have to pay the tax levy. When you build brand new, you have to. And that goes the same thing with our recreations. If we fix something, we have to use a tax base. If we just tear it down and build brand new, we have development charges. We don't have to go to the taxpayer. So she's getting $9 billion. That's a lot of money for them. And I'm happy. Because at the end of the day, like we said, when our house was full, we just go there. But some of the regional councillors from Mississauga said they would support it. They might not support our whole hospital, but when it comes to the cancer portion, the 390 million, 396 million, Mississauga is going to be using ours too. So at the end, we should be in this together. It's not about Brampton or Mississauga at the end. Yeah. That's not right.
And we keep hearing news about like the infrastructural developments in Brampton, and apparently a $35 million cricket stadium is being made in Brampton. And it feels really bad, at least to me, like, you know, when we see that such amount of huge money is being spent on infrastructure, but not on medical facilities.
Well, the cricket stadium is different money. It comes from recreation. So we're building like Howden Recreation in my area. It was an old building, we tore it down. Victoria Park caught fire, we tore it down. That does not go to the taxpayers. It's development charges. So when a builder builds a high rise or houses, he has to pay development charges. If it's part of recreation, it's got nothing to do with the tax. If we use this money for recreation, we cannot use our money towards the hospital. That was changed in 1996, which should have never been changed, because we have lots of money in the recreation. We could use that money into the hospital, but you're not allowed. Also, developers. I know when we built this, this other hospital here was built. A lot of developers give us $1 million, $2 million. You cannot use that towards your 125 million. That money goes towards the hospitals because they have to come up with 125 million. So they use the developers. We have to go to the tax base. That's how it works. So I wish that rule was not changed, because then we could say, hey, what's more important, a cricket stadium or a hospital? And of course, people are going to say the hospital. So the money for cricket cannot be transferred over there. If we're going to do a cricket, it'll be a cricket, but this one here has to come out of the taxpayers.
the weekly voice, leader in South Asian news.
And if we talk about the motion that you have put forward in the council, so around $53 per year?
Well, last hospital, when they did it, the levy in 2012, I was paying about $43 on my house. My house, okay, I don't got a $2 million home. Today's worth about $1 million. So I'll probably be about $53. That went from 2012 to 2018. We raised $60 million. But now the population's grown. So instead of doing 7 years, we could do it in 5 years and raise the same money. We have almost 22 million left over from our last hospital. We also have, I looked into it, part of my motion was we could look at the projects that we were going to do, like Wyden William Parkway, Torbram, certain roads that we're not doing it no more. The money's there. That money could be transferred. So we came up with close to about, I think, 46 or 47 million, plus the 22. So we're already around the 65 million we have. So we only have to come up with another 60 million. So hoping the region will give us maybe that 20 million, and we only go to the taxpayers for 40 million, we could get it done in 2 years. So really, now my house, $1,100,000, I'll probably be paying about $53 a year. So even if I have to pay for 3 years, it's $150. It's not the end of the world when you have to take your father, your mother, your kids, your wife, myself, anyone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, I was at an event yesterday, and you look at all these things, no one's with masks. No one. It's like, you know, we go to these other places, you scan you at the door if you're proof of vaccine and all, and then when you go in, everyone, so why are you scanning me if I go in there and nobody wears them?
Yeah.
So I get called to these events, I don't want to go, because I see them without masks, and you know, my wife only has one vaccine because she had a surgery and the side effects and stuff. So if I get it, she's gonna get sick. But if you don't go, they're gonna criticize me because I didn't show up to an event. So it's
a dilemma.
It's a dilemma, and you know, and I even tell Patrick, like, he's going all over the place. If we're gonna set rules, we gotta set it all. But again, the province. I understand the groceries and supermarkets have to be open, but is it fair that we go watch basketball, hockey, bars are open, strip joints are open, and then you can't see a doctor? If you want to see a doctor, they tell you go online.
Yeah.
And most of these doctors, what they say, oh, if you're sick, go to the emergency. That emergency is seeing 450 people a day. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So when you say our hospital is not good, it's not the hospital, it's us. Starting from politicians. We're not pulling our weight to help out because they can only do so much. So.
And Councillor, before I wrap up, so what, according to you, the future looks like for the residents of Brampton when it comes to healthcare? Because promises have been made in the past as well. People are still waiting, and everybody, as you mentioned, everybody needs medical care, and you never know when you land up in a hospital.
Absolutely, and you know that's the thing is, okay, our Ford government did say they're giving it to us, hoping they keep their word. And you know, when the Liberals were in, they promised a university and a hospital. The Ford government came along and they canceled. So, you know, we have to do our share here at the city. Once we start this levy, at least if they don't back out, we have the money for future. But I don't see why they have to back out when Mississauga's getting $9 billion for their hospital. Hospitals everywhere, and Brampton suck. So if it comes to that point, guys, you know, like, don't vote for the Conservatives. I'm not a party person, but I don't like making promises just to get the vote and then get it broken. And like I said at the beginning, in 2018 when we did these town halls, we were all over the place on hallway miss, and I'm to blame. It looks like you forget.
Yes.
And that's not the right way to do it. Healthcare is for everyone. Everyone's going to need a hospital sooner or later, or a doctor.
And it shouldn't be an agenda, especially during the elections.
That's right. And this should have come out way before. We would have been under construction. Now they promised to start 2023. You know, he should already give us some money. Like, you're proving it, but I don't see a check. So when I'm telling the residents, yeah, it's going to happen, I don't want to make that promise because the money comes from that. We can only do our share at the city and at the region, hoping we get it. If we don't get it from the region, well, we're going to have to come up with a say. The residents have to pay that $350 or $400, and that's 7 years. $400 per the residents is not going to hurt. And then it all depends on the province. So if he doesn't come up, well, you know, Andrew Hudak promised to do it. You know, they did tours our hospital. Christine Ellie was here. They did it. They said we need it. We voted them in. and here is before an election and a promise. So let's see what happens. And I don't want to fight, or even council should not be fighting with the province, because that's what happened with the LRT. We fought with them, we got 0. Now, we do deserve, with the population numbers, if you look at other places, per every 1,000, they got 2.3 beds, we only got 1.
Yeah.
We need 800 beds, but 250 plus the cancer treatment, plus 100 beds in case we grow, is better than nothing. So let's take what we have for now and build on that, because if we don't take that, we're going to go another 20 years with another emergency.
Yeah.
And fight with the province. That's how I see it. So,
well, thank you, Councillor, for sharing your insight with us. And I'm sure that, sooner or later we'll get some facilities for the residents
I think
here.
so. I think the province knows that we're desperate, and because at the end of the day, if we don't have it here, we're just going to Mississauga, we're going to Toronto, so we're just taking room up for someone else. And I wish they came up with 100%, but they don't. And unfortunately, we have to come up with our share. We have to do our job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Every year, thousands of immigrants across the globe come to Canada to make this country their home. No wonder Canada has been named one of the top-ranked countries to immigrate in the world, thanks for the immigrant-friendly policies and laws the country has. But is this scenario changing now? If you go to IRCC's Twitter handle, you'll see many immigrants complaining about how they have not heard from IRCC on their application status for months. Some have been waiting over a year just to get some correspondence from the government. If we talk about numbers, CBC reports that Canada had goal of welcoming 81,000 refugees by the end of 2021. Figures provided by the IRCC show the department was about halfway to its refugee intake target on October 31st this year. As of that date, Canada had welcomed more than 7,800 government-assisted refugees, well below the federal government's target of 12,500. Canada had accepted just 4,500 privately sponsored refugees. The intake target for privately sponsored refugees was 22,500. IRCC also recorded more than 32,000 refugees who qualified as protected persons, those who request asylum after entering the country, which was substantially below its target of 45,000.
Well, when we're dealing with asylum seekers, we're dealing with people who present themselves here. We don't necessarily stick to a rigid limit depending on the people who present as vulnerable individuals. We have obligations both under Canada's domestic laws and in international law to welcome the people who do qualify for asylum. So we set estimates based on how many people we may expect based on anticipated traffic that could come into Canada's borders. So it's really a question of how many people end up arriving in Canada rather than us seeking to fill spaces for asylum seekers. Of course, other immigration streams would be different.
The Weekly Voice, leader in South Asian news.
To top it all, IRCC's new data shows that their backlog stands at almost 1.8 million applications.
Yeah, look, this is a really serious issue. I think the circumstances that we're dealing with right now in Canada's immigration system are facing a once-in-a-century challenge like so many other aspects of Canadian society. The obvious challenge is that we were trying to, in some ways, hit the most aggressive immigration target in the history of Canada at the same time that the border was closed to protect the public from a public health point of view. This put us in a position where we were focusing over the past year and a half, primarily on people who were already within Canada but didn't have permanent status. Of course, the demand to come to Canada, which remains a destination of choice for people all over the world, that demand continued. So what we're seeing right now is there's an increase in the number of people who want to come to Canada compared to the spaces that may be available. So what we want to do to address the backlog is look at the levels plan that we're going to be tabling in Parliament in accordance with the timelines that are required of the government to present a plan in Parliament in the new year. But we also want to address certain systemic inefficiencies that we've seen about the application process. Canada right now largely still has a paper-based system, and we're working. I'd point out we have nearly $1 billion allocated to help modernize and digitize the immigration system, and my hope is that as different features of this more modern system come online, we're going to improve the user experience and be able to cut into the backlog that's leaving a lot of people wondering when they're going to be able to qualify for permanent status here.
With so many applications in backlog and the year coming to an end, it will be interesting to see how IRCC meets their target numbers for this year. Toronto's real estate market is always on fire, but this might be the best time to sell your properties in GTA. I chatted with realtors Parveen Arora and Sam Dillon from Team Arora on the current situation of the selling market in GTA. Hello everyone, today I am with Team Arora. I have Mr. Sam Dillon and Parveen Arora with us, and today we will talk about the ongoing market situation when it comes to selling the houses in GTA specifically. So tell me, what is the situation like?
First of all, Pragya, thank you very much for having us over here. And as you asked regarding the selling in GTA market, right now, real estate market is very, very hot in GTA, right? And selling the property is not difficult at all. And buying the property is difficult at this time, but selling property is not a problem in GTA's market at this point.
And what is the reason for that, if you can elaborate?
Well, thank you first of all for having us here. The main reason remains the same as is discussed earlier also, it's demand and supply. The demand is so huge in GTA area, especially because of all the immigrants, they want to settle in the main hubs, in the main cities, and that creates a huge demand in the housing market. But there is not enough supply in correspondence to the demand. So whenever there is more demand and less supply, the market is always going to heat up, prices are always going to go up, and bidding wars and fighting for property continues in the market.
And as you mentioned, the bidding war, is it a reason why the selling price go up in the housing sector?
Pragya, as Sam mentioned, supply and demand, that's the main factor in real estate industry, not only in real estate industry, I would say in each and every industry. Because in real estate, demand is so high compared to the supply in the market. So that's why bidding war is there. Lot of property, not lot of property, I will say almost all the properties in today's market are selling more than asking price. And there is more than one offer on each and every property. And when there is more than one buyer interested on each and every property, so everybody wants to secure the property. The only way to secure the property is to give the higher price. And everybody is trying to push for the higher price. Some of the buyers, even they are stretching beyond even their limit to secure the property. Sometimes they are successful, sometimes even by stretching that, still they are not successful to secure the properties.
So is it safe to say that this is the best time to sell properties?
Best time to sell, Pragya, that's a very good question. The best time to sell property, definitely this is the best time. There is no second thought on that one. But the best time to sell the property is low inventory. Right now, inventory is low. Definitely that is there. But at the same time, it also depends on the seller's reason why they want to sell the property. If they have any plan to upsize, downsize, definitely that's the time they can consider that too. But sometimes, if they have this thought, oh, we want to sell the property, maybe down the road after some time we will buy the property, then I won't suggest those type of sellers, to sell the property at this time, because maybe they sell it now, later on it will be more difficult for them to secure any property in the market.
So is this the good news that you're giving, that this is an appropriate time to sell the properties? Is it equal for all kind of property, like condominiums and homes, like it is same for everything?
It's not same for all the properties right now, especially the low rise. There is very low inventory, and condominium, mid rise and high rise, still there is enough supply in the market. So on that side, there are not that many bidding wars or not that many multiple offers happening on the high rise and mid rise, but on low rise definitely there is. And secondly, it depends on the area too. Some of the areas are very hot because there is very low supply, but some of the areas they still have reasonable supply, so over there the prices are still moderate, but most of the areas are still very aggressive because supply is very low.
Talking of the best time to sell, they say the best time to sell is when you don't have to sell. So, if you don't have to sell, you want to sell, this is the right time to sell.
I have one more question. I see these boards a lot, like, in front of the houses, the sold properties, sold over asking price.
Right.
And right now I can see many boards like that.
Right.
Is it really happening?
It is happening, Pragya, because one thing is there is a fair market value, and how we decide the fair market value. Fair market value you decide just by the comparison the properties sold in that neighborhood. And what is happening in today's market, most of the sellers, what they are doing, they are putting their properties below market value. So one reason is when the property is below market value, definitely it will sell over asking. But at the same time, properties are selling even above market value because there is no property sold in that price range recently. What is happening, let's say on one street, there is a 1,2,500 square feet property. If that is sold for 1.7 million, most likely the next property on the same street will be sold higher than that. So there is very difficult to decide any fair market price for the property. So most of the properties, number one, those are underpriced, and secondly, those are selling above market value, or you can say what are the recent sales are, those are selling above those recent sales. So that's why a lot of properties you are seeing nowadays over asking price.
Okay, so like as you mentioned that it's a good time for selling, what are the points an average seller should keep in mind before selling the property?
There's many factors, Pragya, to consider. But if we were to summarize the whole process, there are three main factors that come into play when selling a property, or I should say, which is the very basics of selling a property. To get the maximum value of your property, first of all, it's presentation of the property that comes into play. How well is that property presented? Secondly is the marketing of that property. And third, of course, is the price of that property. These are three basic factors that will come into play when selling a property.
Community, automotive, Bollywood and real estate. Stay up to date with what's happening here and back home. Plug into opportunities and trends that can change your life. The Weekly Voice, Canadian leader in South Asian news. Get your paper edition or read online at weeklyvoice.com.
So whenever we are deciding or considering selling a property, should we always contact a listing agent or should we do it ourselves?
Actually, the thing is this, anybody can sell the property, Pragya. The main question is this, who can get you the best price, right? Sure. Let's put it this way, in today's market, if you put the property for sale, definitely you will sell it, And if you hire a realtor, what realtor will does for you, they will give you the right information about the market. They will give you the right strategy about the market. This is the time we should be going with multiple offer, or we should be just putting a price and negotiating the offer, because market never remains the same. Market always fluctuates. Sometimes it's upwards, sometimes it's downwards, sometimes it's stable, right? So having a professional, you always gain end of the day. Selling property by yourself, you may be able to sell it, but if you want the best results about your sale, it's always advisable to hire a professional for that.
And a point to be noted here is the stats show that only 2% of the properties are sold by the owners themselves. Rest 98% of the properties are sold by professional real estate agents. So it's up to the seller where they want to be. Only 2% chance of selling their property or 98% of selling their property.
Yeah, so I think the knowledge is really important when you're dealing with selling and buying.
Let me share here. Let's say if the market is on upward side, the way market is right now, If you don't have the professional with you, you may be losing some money, you will leaving money on the table when you are selling your property. And when the market is on downside, you may not be able to even sell the property, So in both scenarios, having a professional is always advisable, because by yourself, sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, I would say, you won't be able to get the good results.
And the biggest thing that comes into play here is the trust factor. Because when a property owner is selling the property himself, the buyer does not know him, Same thing, the seller does not know the buyer. They might have, interacted during this period, but when both of them are working with professionals, there is a factor of trust. The listing agent has earned the trust of the seller, and the buying agent has earned the trust of the buyer. So that makes a deal happen very quickly, very effectively, and there are no hiccups in those deals. A lot of the times, even if the seller and the buyer, they reach a deal, a lot of the times there are chances that before closing it may fall apart. So that trust factor in completing a sale is utmost importance.
I think it's a great point you just mentioned. And before we wrap up, what advice you would want to give to an average seller, if I asked you this question, because you've been in this market for for a long time. So what advice you would want to give?
For the sellers, I would say, first of all, they have to see the reason, what's the reason they want to sell the property. Some of the sellers, they might want to cash the market, but if they want to cash the market, that's not a problem. They can cash it, but at the same time, if they are considering to buy something down the road, maybe after 1 year or 2 years, if they are considering that one, then they have to rethink that decision. If they are planning to buy something in GTA market, that may not be beneficial for them, because by the time they want to buy something, the price may not be the same what they are getting in today's market. Yes, if they want to move out of the GTA market, or if they have a plan, some people, they have a plan, we want to move out of Ontario, or some of them, they want to move out of a particular area and they want to go to the different area, there might be the scenario where that will be beneficial for them. But if they want to buy in the GTA market and sell in the GTA market, I won't suggest that they sell right this time and buy some different time. If they want to do both transactions at the same time, that's perfectly fine. And the secondly, for the sellers, I will suggest definitely get some professional advice, because you may not be able to decide the right things for your property and the right strategy for your property when you are selling the property. So getting professional advice is also very important in today's market. And on the top of that, also put some, I would say, time and efforts on the presentation of property too, because if the property is well presentable, it is much easier to get the higher price. If it's not presentable, sometimes just by spending small amount on the house, like a fresh coat of paint, and some small renovation in the house, help them to get a much higher price compared to the investment what they are doing on the renovations.
The one thing I like to point out here is most sellers are already doing this currently. Always, take opinion from more than one real estate agent. Ask them, have a set of questions, ask each of them, and then select the one which you feel is the right fit for you. See, that you have to create that right fit, not only between the buyer and the seller, but at the same time, the right fit between the seller and the listing agent is very important. Communication is one big thing that brings the terms very close. A lot of times people hire an agent. They think that they hired a real estate agent, and it turns out they hired a secret agent because they don't hear back from them.
Oh. So all the viewers who are planning to sell their houses currently or any property, one thing that I learned from this interview is always do your research, and if possible always go for a listing agent or a realtor, because they can give you more information than you probably have currently.
In the last Pragya, I would like to say one thing more, for all the viewers, if they do decide to sell their property, there is no harm to get the second opinion. They might be considering another realtor or another professional, but even if they want, they can call us, and there is no obligation. We will definitely give them the right advice according to their neighborhood and the market conditions, so that way they can make their well-informed decision.
Yeah, and so for all the viewers, you can see the screens, and at the bottom you can find Team Aurora's contact information. If you have something in mind, if you want some consultation, if you want any kind of discussion, you can contact them. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Social media and brands go hand in hand. In the present world, social media is the easiest way to expand business and reach out to a large number of people. Many brands now have a dedicated team of digital advertisers and strategists who look after the marketing aspect of the company. In fact, in current times, a company's growth is measured by the number of likes and impressions their social media handles and websites get. Now, what if these big brands decide to leave social media at this age and time and go for traditional advertising? Will it work? Facebook is one such social media platform which is being abandoned by big brands now. Check our next report to know more.
Facebook is not a preferred medium of advertising for big brands anymore. Many companies are leaving the social media platform over its purportedly unregulated hate speech, racism, and possible data breaches. In June last year, hundreds of companies banded together in a boycott to stop advertising on Facebook as part of the Stop Hate for Profit campaign, which sought to pressure the network into taking a tougher approach against racist and hateful content. Several high-profile companies joined the cause, including Microsoft, HP, Reebok, Adidas, Lululemon, Hershey's, amongst others. Although not aligning themselves directly with the campaign, Coca-Cola followed suit, releasing a statement saying there was no place for racism on social media. Although Facebook says it will do more to prevent online hate and harassment, not much has been done by the company in this regard.
We're at another crossroads. We can either continue to stand for free expression, understanding its messiness, but believing that the long journey towards greater progress requires confronting ideas that challenge us. Or we can decide that the cost is simply too great. And I'm here today because I believe that we must continue to stand for free expression.
And the latest company to join the bandwagon to leave Facebook is UK retailer Lush Cosmetics, which has a large footprint in Canada. The company has announced its plan to cease posting on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Snapchat accounts. Lush had previously tried to abandon social media in 2019 with just its UK accounts, but came back when the COVID-19 pandemic began. Lush is now bringing back the deactivation and applying it to all 48 countries it operates in. The cosmetic and bath product retailer expressed the view that social media was blocking real conversations with customers. In response, they closed their main office social media channels in favor of creating quality content on their website. They encourage users to continue to use Lush hashtags and engage with individual shops' social media accounts, but to contact Lush directly for customer care. While the efforts made by Lush is admirable, it is still doubtful how well Lush fares economically during the ongoing holiday season without its presence on social media.
It's time now to know what's happening in the world of entertainment. Indian comedian Vir Das has been in news for quite some time now. The actor turned comedian received a nomination by international Emmys for his comedy show on Netflix. The comedian lost the award to the French show Call My Agent, but he says that he's happy that he got to represent India at the prestigious Emmys. Talking about him representing India, Vir Das got another opportunity to represent his country at the Kennedy Center, where he delivered his now famous monologue, Two Indias. Before I talk further about it, I want you to see a snippet of his video.
I come from which India? I come from two Indias. Those are the Indias that I bring on stage with me right now. I come from an India where children in masks hold hands with each other, and yet I come from an India where leaders hug each other without masks.
Vir Das received huge backlash and trolling from the Indian audiences on this monologue. And while what he said is right and true to some extent, the place and the audience were not right. I'll explain it to you why. But before that, I want to mention that my views are not motivated by politics. It is driven by logic. Vir Das performed at the prestigious Kennedy Center in New York, where he was billed as India's best stand-up comedian. So this means he understands that this platform is important and big. Now, why would he choose to project the most menacing issue India is currently facing in front of his audience? If we live in a family and there is an issue, wouldn't it be ideal to discuss it within the family so something could be done about it, instead of talking about it to the outsiders who can technically do nothing to solve the issue? Vir Das did the latter. He chose to discuss these issues in front of an NRI audience who can feel the pain of the people living in India but cannot do anything to eradicate these issues. Instead, things would have made much more sense if Vir Das had recited the same monologue in his own country amidst the residents of India. Another problematic thing about Vir Das's monologue is his generalization of everything. According to his monologue, every man in India is a rapist. I cannot believe that a person of his stature didn't pay attention to the fact that he's targeting a particular community who worships goddesses. Take a look at this video.
I come from an India where we worship women during the day and gang rape them at night.
Now, why would you tarnish a community to get fame? There's another snippet from his monologue that you should see.
I come from an India where we have maids and drivers and yet want to come to America to do their job.
So according to Vir Das, working as a maid or domestic help is demeaning. Yes, many immigrants come from developing nations to developed countries and start their careers with such jobs. But what's the problem in that? Why do you have to make mockery out of it? In the end, I will go by the logic, and the logic says that Vir Das should have at least vetted his script before reciting it in front of a large crowd. And most importantly, he should have chosen the right place and audience for this subject matter. Moving on from Bollywood, let's head towards Hollywood. All this week, English singing sensation Adele has been in the news for all the right reasons. Her latest album 30 is out and she's ruling all the music charts around the world. Adele's new album debut track had strong at #1 for 4 weeks on Billboard's Hot 100 as well as Apple Music's Top 100. And now the pop sensation has asked the streaming platform Spotify to remove the shuffle option on her new album 30. The pop star says through a tweet that our art sells a story and our stories should be listened to as we intended. And when the music industry's reigning queen speaks, everyone listens. So now on Spotify, for premium subscribers, the shuffle icon no longer appears within the larger play icon as it usually does during album view. I guess Adele fans are not complaining. Print, digital, radio, and video. You choose the media. We are the Voice Media Group. Moving further on the top entertainment stories of the week, actor Kevin Spacey was in headlines again. An arbitrator has ordered Kevin Spacey to pay almost $31 million to Media Rights Capital, the production company behind House of Cards, the Netflix series in which the actor starred for 5 seasons until he was fired in 2017 amidst the sexual harassment allegations. Spacey and MRC have been battling in the years since the actor was dismissed from the production over allegations of misconduct on and off the set. In its filing, MRC states that in October of 2020, an arbitrator found Spacey repeatedly breached his contractual obligations while starring as Frank Underwood on the Emmy-winning show, and that his behavior rendered him liable for the millions of dollars lost by MRC. Every year, many people from different countries immigrate to Canada for a better life. But in quest of this desirable life, people have to leave their countries and their loved ones behind. The transition to a new country is not easy as well. Every immigrant has a story to tell, stories of their struggles and sacrifices. One such sacrifice is made by the women of the Sikh community who migrated to Canada years ago. And to tell their story, curator Raji Aujla has come up with an exhibit called Chashme Bulbul that's happening in North York. The event is organized by the City of Toronto and showcases the collections that feature stories of Sikh grandmothers. I chatted exclusively with Raji to know more about her exhibit. Take a listen. Hello and welcome. My name is Pragya and you're watching Voice News Network. Today I'm in conversation with Raji Aujla, who's the president of Wildendorf Cultural Planning and has curated an exhibit called Chashme Bulbul, which will present the works of a group of diverse South Asian artists at the Artworks TO Pop-Up Hub in Bayview Village, North York. Thank you, Raji, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Raji, first of all, I have to tell you what an incredible initiative you have taken up by bringing the voices of South Asian women through this exhibit. And the best part is you're doing this through art and creativity. So what was your inspiration behind this?
Definitely our grandmothers. And just, I think, over COVID, you know, sitting at home and getting to know your identity and having conversations with family in very deep, meaningful ways. I wanted to try to explore what our grandmothers' lives were like, because we don't really see that in the media. We don't see that in a lot of the films and books we read. So I thought it'd be interesting to do this with a sangat of artists, not just myself.
So what kind of artwork or what kind of artist we can expect to see in this exhibit?
Everything. Well, I think so much of the way our grandmothers and mothers told stories is through songs and, you know, boliyan and things like that. And then they also told stories, I think, through textile, you know, the clothing we wear, but also fulkaris and I wanted to tell stories through that medium. But then we also have visual art, paintings and film and music. And so it is kind of cross-discipline.
So I was reading about Chashme Bulbul and I came across something very interesting and I want to read it to you. It says that the exhibit aims to probe Sikh grandmothers' missing narratives from predominantly male recorded historical texts. Tell me more about it.
Well, I think in a lot of the books I was reading, you know, it's a very male-dominated history in general. I think not just in Sikh religion, but generally speaking, when we look at histories and we look at who is writing the books, it's all from the perspective of a man. So I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like if we were to, again, get the stories of our grandmothers, but from other spaces. And I think for women in general, especially South Asian women, so much of the focus is on the boys and on patriarchy and how men influence society. I really was interested more of like how hardworking our mothers are and our daughters. I feel like we don't point to how amazing they are enough. And so I thought through art it could be a very interesting thing to think about.
And this Chashme Bulbul is a part of Artworks TO, which is run by the City of Toronto. So how was your experience like when you took this idea to the City of Toronto?
It was lengthy. I mean, I've been working on this for about 1.5 years now. So last year, the City of Toronto knew that this was something they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, with COVID, there was a lot of delays. But they put out a call for proposals. And at that time, I put together a very vague proposal of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to focus on Sikh narratives because that's the only narrative I know. And I wanted to also think about who I wanted to work with, like Jagdeep Raina, who's this incredible artist. And so when I put the proposal in, I didn't know I was going to be selected. In fact, I put it together in maybe 3 hours, and it was like a 50-page proposal. And then I was away at a cottage and I got the email saying that you were selected, and I was beyond thrilled because we looked into the history and they've never actually had they've never had a Sikh curator before. And so that alone, I said, even those stories are missing from Canada. How do I tell stories of this religion and the people of this religion through art? And so, having Sikh artists specifically was a key focus. And so it's a very lengthy process. But working with the city it's very slow. It's very interesting. It's almost like, I'll give you an example. Didactics, that's what you have, like the written text close to the artwork, so you can understand what you're looking at. And I was like, I want that in Punjabi too. And, there's this back and forth, like, you can't do that. That's like going to cost more. And I was like, well, what's the point of putting this exhibition together if our grandmothers can't read it? And so these were little nuanced challenges, but thankfully I found a good partner. They were really respectful, and we ended up making it exactly the way I wanted it. So yeah.
That's amazing. So I want to talk more about this. I was going through different sections that you have in your exhibit, like something called Chamba, which showcases furniture and artifacts from 70s to 90s era. And then you have something called Fulkari, and then you have a thing called Mother, which, according to me, when I read about it, is an ode from your side to the Sikh mothers, immigrant mothers, right? So it's an interesting lineup, and I'm sure, like, this is so well researched. I am sure you would have taken a lot of time in curating. But how was the experience like meeting these artists and getting in touch with them and making sure that they come on board?
That was the best part, 100%. I mean, you're right. Researching was very grueling, very long, informative. I learned a lot through conversations like this, because you could read about books, like about these things in books, but not about the women. So you'd read from the male perspective, and then you're like, okay, this is how men write about, the partition. I wonder what it would have been like for women. So that was a lot of thinking and talking with people. But the fun part came when I started selecting the artist. And interestingly, from Kirat Kaur, who I didn't know, we were Instagram friends or whatever, but every person I spoke to in this lineup, I said, this is the intention. And I really want to focus on female representation. And everyone was like, oh my God, I'm thinking about this. I've been thinking about it for the last year, or I'm making work already about this. So it was magical that I only knew 2 people in this mix of the 7 artists. I knew 2 of them. All of the other ones were like, oh, we're talking about the same thing. So it was an easy yes, thankfully. And I feel like very privileged as a curator that they all said yes, because the final show, it almost seems like we've all been working on it together, but that wasn't the case. We were working on it separately from different parts of the country, but because our heart was in the right place and in the same place, I felt like we got to do this together,
Yeah, I get it. So, Raji, you talk about women and you do so much, and you are doing through Chashme Bulbul to bring different voices and opinions together, especially, from our community. But things here in Canada are still better for women in comparison to back home, But do you think that still there's a lot needs to be done when it comes to voicing out our opinion as women, when it comes to cultural barriers? And sometimes people, club religion and culture together, and women are expected to, be a little, reserved to themselves. So what do you think about that?
I think we're super behind, personally. And I also respect that there are families that might be very progressive. So we're all on this weird spectrum. I think my parents, my mom was 17 when she came to Canada, and she was a child. And everything that her aspirations were all based on my father, and him making all the decisions as a family was really based on him. But when you think about religion and stories, and when you're talking about your ancestors, you hear all of that from the moms. And so I feel our moms work double time because they're like the cooks. They have to clean, they have to organize everything. They're also working, but they don't get the acknowledgement of how much work they do. I think, you know, right now what I've been seeing a lot in my life is how land is passed down to the boys, not to the women. And I don't understand that, not because I'm like, oh, I want equal rights to this land. I have my own, I'm independent, I feel good. But, you know, in our home, like all the land is owned by my dad, despite the fact that my mom is an equal shareholder, an equal contributor to have worked that. And I could talk to my dad about it for hours and there's no resolve because he's like, this is how it's always been. And I said, why do we have to accept that? And so I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And, you know, today even I was talking, somebody on Instagram messaged me saying, Raji, like, I love this work. I'm a Sikh woman from, like, I guess a different caste. And she said, like, can you please talk about this? Because I hate the caste discussion. And I was like, absolutely. You know, we're a religion that's meant to be welcoming for all. We have to really think about areas where we can improve. And caste is one of them. Like, we shouldn't, in this day and age, we're in Canada. Yeah. Like, somebody asks me about my caste, I actually start laughing. I'm like, what are we in medieval India, like ancient India? So all of these things, even though they don't seem like they're related to the woman, it does relate to the woman at the end. And I think we, as Indians, outside of even religion, we have to do more to make sure women are safe and equal partners in society. So I would say there's a lot more work to be done, and I hope to keep chipping away at it in my own way.
Community, automotive, Bollywood and real estate. Stay up to date with what's happening here and back home. Plug into opportunities and trends that can change your life. The Weekly Voice, Canadian leader in South Asian news. Get your paper edition or read online at weeklyvoice.com.
So, Raji, before I let you go, what message you want to give to the women out there, especially from South Asian community who are new to Canada and they have, like, you know, they want to venture into this industry or maybe some other creative industry? What message would you like to give to them?
Do it. Just don't think about it. I think we think about things too much. Like, I wasn't going to send my proposal. I was tired. It was late. I had a lot of work to do because this is, like, you know, you have your full-time job. This is something you do in addition because it's, you know, you don't know if you're going to get it. So I even wasn't going to do this. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, how much impact everybody got to make through this process. I'm so glad I just took the step and had the courage to. So especially women that are coming from India or Pakistan, Afghanistan, it's like your voice is important too. And only if you let yourself, I guess it's if you allow yourself to think your voice is important, that's when things start changing a little. Yeah. So much we just take it in and we're like, whatever, like it's all good. But I think we should own our voice. And yeah. And on the art side, I feel, I actually sat on the panel for City of Toronto. They had $4 million of public and private money that they were giving to artists. And I sat on the committee that decided which artist proposal was going to receive the funding and which ones weren't. There was not a single, there was, I think, maybe 2 or 3 that I remember that came from Indian artists. Oh. And I was like, and 0 from Sikh artists. So I was like, guys, just put in proposals. Like, you know, Canada wants to hear from these minorities. Yeah. Like, make yourself heard. So. Yeah. A big, long answer to a short question, sorry. No, I appreciate it. So thank you, Raji, for sharing your wonderful insight with us and giving your valuable time to us. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, all of you. The festive season has officially begun. There's holiday cheer everywhere, and this is the time when we can be with our loved ones and also give back to the society. International wrestler and philanthropist Tiger Jeet Singh is one such person who believes in giving back to the people. Through his foundation, he's bringing Milton's famous toy drive event, Miracle on Main Street, back. Last year, he continued with the event virtually due to the pandemic and collected donations up to $275,000. I chatted with him and his team about this year's event. Take a look.
This is an initiative, Maritime Maine, that we look forward to every year around this time of year, where really we get to give back to the community. Working with Tiger and his foundation is massive, and with everything going on with COVID, there's no excuses. We're out there working hard to ensure that all our youth in the region get a Christmas gift over the holidays. Right.
I want to make sure that everyone out there knows that this is a total team effort. Some of our unsung heroes, the silent one, this is Ashley over here.
Hello.
She works day in and day night. She doesn't want to be, talk on the media and all that, but I want to make sure that everyone out there knows that the partnership is like a family between the Tiger Foundation and Regional Police, and we're so blessed. We feel so blessed that this union and this merger happened, and the sky's the limit. This year, watch out.
Thank you very much. And what better than a Christmas market to wrap up today's show? I know it's still November, but the Christmas fields are already here, and so is the famous Christmas market of Toronto. While last year it was closed due to the pandemic, this year the Distillery District of Toronto is shining bright with Christmas lights again. And there is a change. This time it is called Distillery Winter Village, and it is now open for the public. Well, this has surely made me excited for Christmas. And this is it in today's show. We would love to hear your thoughts on our content, so type in the comment section and tell us what you think. You can follow us on our social media handles, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and you'll be able to see us with new content every week on Fridays. Till then, take care, be safe, and thanks for watching.